Public and Joint Judiciary Committee. What a lovely time we have here today. We are here to discuss interim topics, as everyone knows. This process during the session is always a little bit disorganized and a little bit hurried and rushed. And so everyone bear with us as we navigate our interim topics mid-session with the new Joint Interim Judiciary Committee, the #1 committee in the Wyoming legislature, I might add. With that, I'll turn it over to Co-Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Chairman Nethercott. So definitely the #1 committee. At least that's what we say on the House side. I'm sure that's what you say on the Senate side. And so welcome. I'll start off by roll calling. Yes. Can we call the roll?
Senator Cooper.
Here.
Senator French.
Here.
Senator Kolb. Senator Cost.
Here.
Chairman Nethercott.
All right, Co-Chairman Olson.
Representative Crago.
Here. Oh,
Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Oakley. Representative Oakley. Representative Provenza.
Here.
Representative Williams. Vice Chairman Washut.
Here.
Representative Yin. Representative Swanitzer. Chairman Olson.
Here.
Representative Oakley.
Excused. She may have went to our old room.
She's right there.
Let's just wait 1 second here. Representative Oakley, stay here.
Thank you.
All right. So we're just kicking the dust off a little as we get into the swing of being a joint committee. All right. So I'm going to give a little bit of a roadmap for today's meeting so that obviously our representatives and our senators know where we're headed, but also to help the public along through this process. So you may have come across the PDF that has our topics on it. What the co-chairman and I have done is we've been staring at this list, talking about this list, talking with members of the public, talking with our committees, and we've really boiled down, at least at this point, the co-chairman and I have boiled down some of the topics that we're prepared to move forward on. And I'm going to give you that list, not so that I'm saying that that's a permanent list and that's what's going forward, but to help guide comment on it. So if on this initial list that I read, I'm reading it for the purpose of limiting some comment on it so you can take comfort in knowing, okay, those topics the chairman have really discussed and feel really confident that they should move forward. Not that you shouldn't talk on it, just trying to guide that a little.
What Co-Chairman Olson is really saying is that what we're identifying as most likely to occur will most likely occur, and therefore the need to provide lengthy and robust testimony concerning the merit of the topic is probably unwarranted. And so if you can leave your comments to a limited amount of time, 3 to 5 minutes, as a result of the great work that we're still doing, that would be most appreciated.
This is why I love my co-chairman. She always says it better than I say it. Okay, here's going through the list. Juvenile justice, electronic filing and electronic records, bias motivated crimes, Title 25 review, Wyoming Supreme Court opinions, unified court system. Now, the remainder of the list, we've done some grouping to help with public testimony as well. We have a topic on criminal code penalties, a topic on marijuana regulation, a topic on, we'll call it a light constitutional dive into topics such as religious freedom, Article 5 and Second Amendment. We have a public records review topic, which includes law enforcement and recordings. We have a Charitable Protections Act topic. Then we're getting down to the real specific at this point as my list goes down. Review of non-compete clauses, and then government immunity. And hopefully I've hit everything on the list. So that's the list that we're going to go through. today. And then as a little further roadmap, once we take public testimony, move to our committee, what we're going to do is so be taking your notes, because what the co-chairman and I are going to ask is that out of the list that you provide us with your top three-ish, top three rankings, could be on this list, could actually be off of the list, just top three things you'd really like to focus on. And then we'll take the public testimony, the list, your list, and we'll move from here and then further discuss that as we move it into the management council process.
I would like to further add, Mr. Co-Chairman, that the list that is published and seen provides a legislative sponsor associated with it. That does not mean that the legislative sponsor is actually advancing that particular topic or even was notified that their name was being used to put that topic up. For example, the first on the list is state constitutional amendments for the Second Amendment. I was not contacted about that. I'm not advancing that particular issue. I just was probably identified as a chairman of that particular topic, and that's why it was presented that way. And so for the public's interest and for the committee members also as well, just because a legislator's name is associated with the topic may or may not mean that they're individually advancing that particular issue. So just for clarity for the public.
Yep, great clarity. I think I noticed the same thing happened to me once or twice on the list as well. All right, with that, let's start public comment with our agencies. And we're not gonna go through topic A, topic B, topic C. Just gonna invite you up to introduce any testimony that you want about the topics. Again, just being cognizant that I think we're gonna spend 1 hour in here today is our goal. So about 9 o'clock is the cutoff. Oh, we're live. You want to go online for any testimony or for agencies?
If anyone's on public comment on Zoom.
Okay, let's take a look at, I don't have my Zoom open.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, we have Colonel Ratliff here from YDOT, and that's our only attendee online.
All right, if the colonel would like to provide any testimony on any of these topics, come on in.
Good morning, Mr. Co-Chair, Madam Co-Chair. I really don't have anything I specifically would like to address. I'm here as a resource to answer questions, and that's about it, if there are any.
All right, committee, do you have any questions for the colonel? No. Co-chairman.
Great to see you, Lieutenant Colonel. I know that YDOT and the Joint Judiciary did sponsor legislation this past year that died this session. So is there an interest from YDOT in advancing the same issues that we worked on last year with this new Joint Judiciary Committee as a result of us having so many new members? And if so, would you like to speak to that?
Madam Chair, I think there would be an interest in I didn't hear it specifically mentioned, but I think there would be an interest in chatting about DUI amendments again. It met with some difficulty, obviously, this session, but I think it's worthy of some further discussion during the interim.
And it sounds like that would be, I wasn't present in the last interim, but it would be a continuation of the interim topic on DUI amendments.
Well, Mr. Co-Chairman, members of the public and YDOT, I know that there was discussion and this would actually be the third year that it's been looked at. One, there were proposed changes from the driver's license side of our DUI laws that came out of the Joint Transportation Committee. Those were unsuccessful in the 2020 session. And then the Joint Judiciary Committee took the issue up again in 2020 and advanced a bill, which again was unsuccessful and incorporated additional concepts from the driver's license portion of our DUI laws to adding in concerns regarding the enforcement of the ability for law enforcement and the courts to obtain blood draws from DUI suspects. And so that issue was advanced and it was unsuccessful in the 2021 session. So just as a matter of point and probably why the Lieutenant Colonel is here, and just offer that up for the Joint Judiciary Committee and those members who were on the committee in this past year.
All right, committee, anything else for the Colonel? Okay, thank you, Colonel.
Thank you.
To this topic, Mr. Otokoven.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, Byron Otokoven, the Executive Director of the Wyoming Sheriffs and Chiefs. I sense you'll probably go to general comments on the list, I presume, and topics of interest, and would like to offer a couple of thoughts on that, and specifically to the DUI. I think it would be a good topic for the committee to take up from the standpoint of understanding the process of a DUI. And I say that because the discussion on the floor this year made it clear that members of the legislature have a general misunderstanding of police procedure. And that process, that police procedure misunderstanding carried over into many of the topics that you have before you. So I think it would be well suited to educate the committee, especially on the area of DUI. Wyoming has a very piecemeal DUI statute. It occupies approximately 5 pages in the green books. And I would remind the committee that the crime of homicide occupies a single paragraph. We've pieced pieces of DUI as we've tried to maneuver our way through, whether it's involving the traffic stop, implied consent, field maneuvers, search warrant for blood draw, in which some communities choose not to do forced blood draws, even though we have a search warrant. Folks who refuse the blood draw, hoping that they can get off, and it happens. So there's a host of loopholes in DUI that people seem to be happy to have from time to time when it's someone they know involved in the DUI, and not so happy to have when it's someone else. So we have quite a hodgepodge as it relates to the DUI statute. And several years ago, we looked at actually doing a rewrite of the statute, starting with that basic traffic stop and culminating with the activities of court. That fell through, but I think the discussion of starting with a basic traffic stop and working our way through may be beneficial to help understand that police procedure. And that police procedure then carries over into several of the topics, whether it's the police recordings, the release of information, the information that's public, the timeliness of that, and the interaction with the county attorney's office and the judicial, the court processes, I think would be valuable to kind of take a look at that. And then when we look at one of your topics, of course, has to do with crime and punishment. And again, there's several myths and fallacies that go with there. And it may be valuable to look at, again, some of the CSG information where they actually did some case study and presented to the judiciary, you know, that person that ends up seemingly with their first offense going to the state pen, only to learn in one of their case studies, that person had been in front of the judge 17 times, but it seemed to be their first time. You know, it was the illusion that was there based on some of the court records, but when you actually dove into the processes, they were involved in the judicial system for quite a while. So I think there's some good value in understanding some of that police procedure, some of the criminal justice procedures, because after all, this is the Judiciary Committee. We can certainly look at, and that would help dispel some of the myths and misunderstandings. For example, that everyone is in jail for marijuana, and if only we would do something about that, we wouldn't have anybody in jail. And if I remember correctly, in the CSG report, they reported that less than 4% of the people in the penitentiary have anything to do with marijuana, and those people have everything to do with the distribution of marijuana, and there's no one in jail for the use of marijuana. So I think there would be some value in calling in the experts and dealing with the myths and misunderstandings or the popular perceptions as it deals with law enforcement procedure. Chairman Olson.
Yeah, Mr. Otakoven, when you noted that the body, the legislature had little experience with DUI process, I thought that was probably a good thing.
Mr. Chairman, I would as well. It's unfortunate that with the sheer number of attorneys, some of them do not either, Mr. Chairman. And I was hoping for clarity on the floor, and maybe we'll be able to provide that as we work through some of the issues.
Thank you, Mr. Otakoven. Thanks for being here. Thanks for those comments.
And we would stand ready to assist you and help garner information and gather statistics and facts as we can, Mr. Chairman.
All right, any additional public comment about any other topic? Welcome. If you would introduce yourself to the committee, your names and who you're with, and then share with us your comments.
Chairwoman Nethercott, members of the committee, my name is Donna Sheen. I'm with the Wyoming Children's Law Center, and I won't belabor the point, as I'm very thrilled to hear that you're going to be doing juvenile justice topics on the interim, and that is a priority. I did want to allow time to introduce some of the team. You'll note in the materials that I submitted that we're putting together a very impressive team of experts in order to help the committee with this topic. And I'll just turn it over to them to briefly introduce a couple of the members.
Chairman Nethercott, members of the committee. Hi there, Chairman Nethercott, members of the committee. My name is Dr. Kayla Bird. I'm an assistant professor of psychology at the University of Wyoming in the cognitive and legal areas. My training's in law, psychology, and human development. I brought with me today my graduate student, Ms. Brittany Cangelosi. Before I begin, I just want to make clear that we're not here as representatives of the university. Ms. Cangelosi and I are eager to help Ms. Sheen and others of the committee to advance the standardization of data collection across the state of Wyoming involving justice for juveniles. We hope to expand and standardize data collection for these youth. Doing so will help us identify effective programming. It will help us to reduce juvenile recidivism. It'll keep our youth within our communities. Doing so will reduce costs on juvenile placements and will help advance these juveniles in the future. Thank you for your time.
We'd be happy to answer any questions, but if not, that was all we wanted to address the committee with.
Any questions for Ms. Sheen? Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Thanks for
Thank you.
advancing the issue.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Mr. Winnie. If you'd introduce yourself to the committee.
Good morning. I wanted to mention the disclosure of peace officer recordings topic.
Oh, hey, Bill. Sorry, can we back up a little bit?
Yes,
Get your name
I'm
for
sorry.
the
Bill
record.
Winnie, Sublette County. Wanted to talk briefly about the peace officer recording topic. While I note that peace officer recordings, body cams, dash cams are recording what is clearly a public act of the state, I would also note that you need to have some sideboards on what is recorded, or not what is recorded, what is released. The very essence of a lot of things our military does in intelligence operations against other guys is just observing routine daily operations. And from that, mining information. And the bad guys can do that to the police too, if you generally release these kind of recordings. Certainly a family that was that had somebody involved in something with the police might have a clear interest in it, but a general release of it should have sideboards on it. Subject to your questions. Thank you very much.
Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Winnie, are you asking for this topic to be discussed during the interim? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Winnie.
I'm not asking directly for it to be discussed. It was on your list. And if it is something that comes up, I was providing my thoughts on where you would go with it.
Thank you, Mr. Winnie. Representative Pat Sweeney. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and co-chairman. So Madam Co-Chairman, excuse me. So I just wanted to thank you for including bias motivated crimes. What we're after is a Wyoming solution to this, and not to anything disrespectful to the committee. I think the media kind of got it wrong on what we were doing and trying to attempt to do with this piece of legislation. And we do want, and I apologize to the committee, was no disrespect intended to the committee. But I do, hopefully we can come up with a Wyoming solution that works well. And the last thing I want is Wyoming to be last on the list. Hopefully we won't be by the time we get this across the finish line. But thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Representative Sweeney. And I know we're going to be circling back for sure, because on this particular topic, one of the things that is going to be important is defining the scope of the study. I think that's going to be very important for the committee before we even present anything to the Management Council. So I'm sure we'll be discussing that more.
And making sure the media doesn't get it wrong.
Wow.
What? That never happens.
Thank you. Questions for Representative Sweeney? Well, thank you, Representative Sweeney. Yes, Gail.
Good morning, Gail Simmons. I'm from Sheridan County. I'm a nonpartisan blogger on the legislative processes and civics on two topics just to consider. On the Wyoming juvenile justice system, if you have not seen the podcast that was about the woman in Sweetwater County who had her name was Larissa Salazar. There's a podcast that if you haven't seen, I urge you to see. And we are one of the last in the nation around juvenile justice, and specifically, we are, I think, number one in incarcerating juveniles. So that's on that one. And then on the bias motivated crimes, recently, I think within the last 2 years, there was a group that was for Wyoming, I think was a study group as a part of the equal rights, or not equal rights. Anyway, the commission under bias. The head of that is from my hometown in Sheridan. And he was telling me about this report they had out, and his primary concern, and the concern of the report that they brought out, was that we need to have data that before we go jumping into trying to create more statutes around making it more difficult or more punishment on bias, that we need more information about bias crimes, that we don't have data, we don't have facts, we don't know how much it is, we don't know where it is. And so when you're looking at that, I think that, as in many things, that it doesn't need to be a single step. You can start with, let's get some documentation on what that bias crime is. And one of the things that really struck me was that here is a man who is like third or fourth generation Wyoming. He's African-American. He is a retired dentist. He is retired from the military. And when he told me that when he drives from Casper to Jackson, he will not stop for gas, it was one of those where, the hair stands up. And so I don't even know what that is like, but this is not somebody who thinks of himself as a victim, and he's very, very, very conservative. So this thing on bias, I would just say, you need to study it, please, but also do not think that you have to solve all at once. I think that what they came out with that report is critical in getting that data. Thank you.
Ms. Simmons, very helpful, because something I've been discussing with other members of the body is this, like I mentioned, the scope, and is reporting the first logical step to take.
Mr. Chairman, when I was with General Electric, we had a program called Six Sigma. And one of the tenets of that, and it applies throughout most anything you do, is if you don't measure it, you can't improve it. So if you don't know what it is, you don't know if it needs improvement, where it needs improvement, how does it need to be improved? So yes, I would say that that's the first step.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ms. Simmons. Can you repeat where we can access that report that you referenced? It's my first question, and then I have a follow-up.
I will send it to you. I know that the doctor had provided it to me, and so I will send it to the chairs and let them disseminate.
Thank you. Second question, have you had any conversation with the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police as to broadening their crime report to include more demographic information? I know that the report that they produce is pretty detailed, includes juveniles. Have you had any conversation with them?
Simmons.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Williams, no, not specifically. I know that reporting is a considerable problem with them. And again, it's why it needs to be studied, like what needs to be collected? How could it be collected? Is there a way to get that collection without making it more burdensome? So I think that understanding what needs to be known and aligning that with what's already being collected would be the best way to ensure that it's not burdensome.
Committee? Additional questions from Ms. Simmons?
Thank you.
Ms. Simmons. It's maybe bounce. Can we bounce to the virtual world? I like to bounce back and forth just to be a little fair. And I think we have a new participant in the virtual world. Ms. King.
Morning, co-chairs. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. Good morning, co-chairs and joint judiciary. My name is Sabrina King, and I am here for the ACLU of Wyoming. I just have a couple of quick comments in particular on a couple of the things that we have been tracking closely this session. But first, I just want to say, gratitude to the folks who have brought the juvenile justice system study to the table, and really looking forward to that. I do want to quickly address the disclosure of peace officer recordings issue and the public records and a couple of the other things that go along with that. I will say first, I do think there need to be sideboards on what is recorded. So I think that's something that we can talk about. In the past, the interested parties on this issue have been able to come to consensus on, in particular, peace officer recordings, how they're disclosed. I think there are more issues that need to be addressed, but I also think we can come to consensus again on that. I have full faith that that's something that we can deal with. Whether that needs to be done as an interim study with the full committee, I think is an open question. And I will leave that to you, but I think either way, clearly the statute needs to be updated. And I think we can do that with the interested parties if that's not something that the committee wants to take up as an interim topic as a whole. The other thing that I did want to address quickly, and it does seem like this will move to the interim, is the bias crimes issue. And I think in terms of scope and really understanding where we are, I do want the joint committees to know that Wyoming actually has a bias crime statute. We have had a hate crime statute since 1957. So we not only will not be the last to get a hate crime statute, we were the first. It is currently under 69101 and 102. 101 is kind of your traditional public accommodation statute. 102 is actually to address discrimination directly. And our hate crime statute is actually more robust than both North Dakota and Virginia's, and is equivalent about to Oklahoma, Michigan, Louisiana, Pennsylvania, a couple of other states. So just in the context of talking about hate crimes and why we need to have this conversation, I would like to shift a little bit away from the notion that we need to do this because Wyoming doesn't want to be last, or we need a hate crime statute. We have one. So I think one of the topics of conversation that could maybe be addressed in the interim is, why has that statute not been used as far as we can tell, maybe ever? There's actually a really interesting article in the Wyoming Law Review from 1958, if anyone is interested in reading it, on some of the problems with the statute. But in the context of the bias crimes conversation, I would also just lift up that the data and the reporting issue, I think, is key. Really understanding the scope of the problem, understanding what issues folks are facing before we get into legislation attempting to, recriminalize people or I think do a lot of the things that the legislation that was proposed this year can do. So if we can address the data and reporting issue, honestly, I'm not entirely sure that there even needs to be a legislative fix to that. It may be more simple than that, but figuring that out, I think, is probably the most important piece. But also to keep in mind that we have a hate crime statute. So we're not, I think, looking at this from the standpoint of we need to pass something so that we're not last. So open to questions, and thank you for the time this morning.
Questions for Ms. King? All right, thank you, Ms. King. Move to Supreme Court and then Mr. Winters.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair. Thank you for allowing us to appear today. My name is Elisa Butler. I'm the State Court Administrator for the Wyoming Supreme Court. I also appreciate the committee's consideration of the topic on electronic records in support of electronic filings. So this committee, although there were different faces, heard quite a bit about that in the August meeting of last year. We have created a new Permanent Rules Advisory Committee at the Wyoming Supreme Court called the Court Records Division. And that committee over the last 9 months has worked really hard to review the statutes that are in place right now in terms of what kind of access does the public and attorneys and agencies have to court records, and what level of access should they have to specific court records. So throughout the statutes, there are references to confidentiality, records that are sealed, records that are privileged, and records that are secret. And so one of the confusing topics that we have addressed over time is, what do those different terms mean, and how should the courts allow access to those kinds of records? And so the committee has worked through those statutes and basically made a determination based on the language of the statutes as to what kind of access different entities should have to court records. And so what we would like to do in the interim is just to provide you with the information, the work that committee has done, and then possible legislative changes that may be necessary as a result of that committee work.
And Ms. Butler, congratulations, by the way, on your new post.
Thank you, Mr.
Well
Chair.
deserved.
Thank you.
Though we love Lily too.
Yes, as we all do, Mr. Chair. Yes.
Ms. Butler, a quick question. I know that there are some legislative members appointed to that Permanent Rules Committee. Do you recall who those members are?
Madam Chair, I do. Representative Crago has recently joined the committee, and we are grateful for his input. And then Senator Ellis is also on that committee. And we have former Senator Lisa Anselmi Dalton is on that committee as well.
Thanks.
Thank you. Now stand for questions if there are any others.
The only question I have, just trying to, we can probably get together on this, but in terms of when we start mapping out our summer, our interim, I think that I heard that your committee is going to be working through most of the interim, probably separate from us, and then it will be the end of it may be closer to the end of our interim that we first actually see you. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chair, we are gearing up for our next committee meeting, which will take place next week. And I anticipate that we will get through all of the statutes next week. And so I believe the next meeting after that, Phil Nicholas is the chair of that committee. And I believe then the next meeting after that will be to determine, how to move it forward. I anticipate there's going to need to be rule changes as well. And so I don't think it will take that long, Mr. Chair. I think that we will be ready to appear in front of you sooner if you all are comfortable with that.
So we'd have something, we will get updates as you go, and then at some point we'll end up with something substantive, but enough time to do something with it, it sounds like, which is good. Okay.
Mr. Co-Chair, Ms. Butler, I know, and for the committee members, there are a number of agencies and the court, which is not an agency per se, but that are the home committee to the Joint Judiciary Committee. And so the Supreme Court, we hear from regularly at every one of our meetings generally and get updates and discuss a number of proposed changes that they may have regarding the statutes associated with our court systems and other activities that they are doing. So Ms. Butler will be a regular and frequent face that we see at every meeting, in addition to like Department of Corrections, Public Defender's Office, and others who we hear from regularly, that part of our just standing work. So, and the fortunate thing with the court is that because of the experience of Ms. Butler, who's also a lawyer, and Ms. Sharp, frequently the work given to us is already done. And so that is really helpful and eases a huge burden off of the committee and LSO staff. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, and sorry, I didn't mean to say that we wouldn't see you or that you weren't welcome. I just meant the committee's work. But yeah, look
Yep.
forward to the interim, obviously.
I understand that, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Butler. All right. Mr. Winters.
Good morning, Co-Chairman Nathan Winters with the Family Policy Alliance of Wyoming. It's good to see you all here today. I just want to let you know that when it comes to the bias motivated crimes, I'll be here to help with the research. I also affirm what Ms. Sabrina King said just a few minutes ago, that we do have a bias motivated crimes bill, essentially a hate crimes bill in the state of Wyoming. But secondly, there was the impression given earlier in testimony on this particular piece of legislation that gave the impression that many bias motivated crimes or hate crimes bills in the country are of same or similar value to what was proposed to you. And I can affirm that that is not true. There are a wide variety of approaches that have been given in various states. And so part of the research I want to provide is to show what that looks like on a nationwide basis, so that we're not out of the norm. And what was being proposed to you was something that would have been out of the norm. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I would welcome any questions that you may have, but also just offer my services.
For the members of the Senate committee, there was a House bill addressing this issue that was presented to the House committee, but we in the Senate never saw it or heard testimony or really know the details concerning that bill. So just for clarity for the Senate members who may be having some blank looks, it was a House bill that never came over. So,
right.
Yep.
But if you would like some entertainment, anytime you can go back and view House Judiciary meetings. They're very entertaining, but that would be one I think you would enjoy.
They're still doing reruns of Senate.
Other questions for former Representative Nathan Winters and former member of this Judiciary Committee? Thank you. Representative Stith, also a former member of this committee, moved on to the land of appropriations. I know the pain.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Co-Chairman, members of the committee, thank you. Just 3 quick comments on e-filing. I encourage you to continue pushing the judicial branch to proceed forward with that. There's going to be a lot of ARP money coming into the state. Maybe the judiciary could use that. Second point, your topic of unified court system. I think that's a really difficult topic, but one worth pursuing. And then finally, the one that I submitted to you is looking at non-compete clauses, which may not be the most important thing you consider, but it rises out of 2 or 3 years ago. Representative Nicholas brought a bill that would essentially prohibit non-compete clauses with respect to physicians, doctors. The idea being that you don't want to have them locked out of practice in case they get sideways with the hospital they're practicing with. That passed the House, failed the Senate, I believe. I looked at this last year and had an individual bill drafted that would be more broad because I thought what's special about physicians, maybe welders, if it's good enough for a physician, it should be good enough for a welder too. So I had an individual bill drafted up, but it quickly gets complicated. And so I thought it might be a committee topic. And here's the idea. Non-compete clauses in Wyoming right now are tilted slightly against the employee in the sense that they are contracts and restraint of trade. They do act to prevent people from practicing their profession, right? So if you're a welder, you want a job, you sign up on your first day, they ask you to sign a non-compete clause. And the law right now is if it's on your first day of work that you sign the non-compete clause, they don't have to give you anything for it. They don't have to give you any special consideration if it's the first day, which is kind of a little quirk in the law. And that results in some distortions. So there you have it. That's all I really have to say about that.
Mr. Co-Chairman. Representative Stith, thanks for your comments concerning the other issues that the committee is faced with, and I appreciate your expertise and experience on the committee in providing those comments concerning electronic filings, in addition to court records, in addition to a unified system and the value of those concepts. Concerning your subject of the covenant not to compete, it seems like a small issue that may not be something that that would be appropriate for an interim topic of a joint committee, but interestingly enough, it is, and it is complicated enough that it is. And I think the committee would find it interesting and something different from crime in courts all the time. So just take that up for consideration as you evaluate that topic. I think it is important and important to Wyoming and is appropriate for an interim topic, interestingly enough, and might provide some interest and depth of conversation for the committee, other than should it be 5 years or should it be 10 years for the felony? So just something to think about.
All right. Anyone else wishing to provide some public testimony on interim topics? I know maybe Representative Larson, you passed out an addition to our list, which I think I read off. It was number 13 of the topics. I just called it government immunity, but if you maybe want to introduce that so the members know when they're ranking their top 3. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I've been bringing a bill similar to this, or it was more focused on YDOT having a governmental immunity inside their contracts. And it's currently in our statutes, it says that the YDOT and the commission can be sued and sue. And this has kind of been overruled by the Supreme Court, saying it was I don't know the exact words. Maybe you can help me, but Supreme Court says that they can do it. And I just think the Supreme Court's legislating, and is that really what the legislature wants? Do we want governmental immunity inside contracts? I think if you have an issue inside of a contract, you should be able to go to the court and discuss it without the agency saying you can't.
So it would be a very limited scope on governmental immunity just to the question of contracts.
Yes.
Which we could have a whole contract half day if we factor in Representative Stith's non-competes. It could be a little bit different than crimes and punishment.
Well, Mr. Co-Chair, I would say the concept of qualified immunity, particularly as applied in contracts, is more complex
Than a half day.
Than covenant not to compete, which are complex as well, actually.
Mr. Chairman, I hope we consider it. Thank you.
Questions for Representative Larson? All right. Thank you, Representative. Any additional testimony? I know I have one more individual who appeared online for YDOT.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Co-Chairman, Melissa DeFratis is available for questions, but does not have any testimony to provide.
Mr. Co-Chair, just to my new senators on the committee, I know they have discussed some ideas that they were hoping to be considered, and only if now would be the time. Senators, if you want to express those thoughts that you had, I would do so now. Senator French.
Madam Chair, Mr. Co-Chair, I would like to have as an interim topic something it's a bit controversial. That's probably an understatement of the day, but fairness in women's sports, or save women's sports. I know in the northwest part of the state, and I would hazard a guess that it's across the entire state, that people are, I know young families up in our part of the world that are very concerned about transgenders being in women's sports, girls' sports, that it's not fair. I know it's a hot topic, but it's also across the state a hot issue, very much so. Now, it's not bigotry in my view, it's biology in my view. So I would like the Joint Judiciary to consider that as a topic. It's a statewide thing, issue. Many of the parents with young girls just don't think it's fair. Now, if an individual wants to do that, that's their personal decision to trans or whatever the proper term is. But I think it's an issue that the Joint Judiciary should address. Won't be an easy topic, but I hope the Joint Judiciary will consider it. Thank you.
Senator French, so I understand the scope. Are you talking about K through 12?
Yeah.
When you say women's sports, are we talking about K through 12?
K through 12 and college also.
And college, okay. Okay, and I guess just my initial thought is, and I'm not sure if joint education has already met, but I'm curious if you thought about proposing that to joint education.
I have not considered that, Mr. Chair. I have not. I thought where there's a lot of legal ramifications to it. I know neighboring states. I had started on a bill based on, well, if I can say, the state immediately to the west that goes clear up to the Canadian border, based on their law. And there was a lot of court decisions involved in that. After considerable consideration, talking to other different individuals about it, it wasn't quite ready for prime time, so I pulled it. I know our state to the east, their legislature went through the process. Their governor initially vetoed it, but then come back with 2 executive orders, one banning transgenders in women's sports in K through 12 and another in college. So it's not, you know, so many people talk to me, those with young girls in sports. They're like, how can we compete? How can our girls compete with a 17-year-old male, 16-year-old male that decides to change his sex? It's just not fair. The sexes are different, even if they trans into another sex. So I understand it's a very hot topic. many states are trying to address it. It's not going after the transgenders. I mean, I think, and I don't know all the information on it, so I'm a little behind the 8 ball on Title IX. I think Title IX brought into the arena that women can compete in sports. And so I would sure like the joint judiciary to address it. Thank you.
Any questions for Senator French? Of note, I was cut, regardless of any of this, from any sports teams. Hi, Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair and Mr. Chairman. I'm not quite sure to address a joint committee like this, so maybe I can get further guidance. I had a couple easy things. The ability of the Board of County Commissioners to dissolve a fair board. I think it's been an issue, and as they can create, my belief is they should have the ability to dissolve. And that would be under 18.8.101, Chapter 9. There's a few other entities in there, but I think if we could look at that and tackle that one issue so we can give clear guidance and clear up that question. That's one of mine. You want me to just go one by one? I just have two. Okay. And the second one would be the review of the county attorneys and the sheriff's salary cap and I know it's been worked before. I think both of these items are going to be fairly quick to get resolved, but possibly attaching those salaries to the district court judges or some other way of addressing the issue and giving the Board of County Commissioners more latitude on how they choose to pay these officials because of their large responsibility they have. And just give the latitude. I wouldn't phrase it as a salary, but it would be up to a certain amount. And those are my two subjects, and I'll stand for any questions. Thank you.
Questions for Senator Kolb? Senator Cost? You have some ideas? Senator Cost?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Sir Chair. The big one that'll only take 2 or 3 minutes would be Title 25. I'm sure we could remedy it real quickly. I really think we've got to work on that and see if we can come up with a resolution to it. After spending a fair number of hours this summer trying to work with it and not getting really where we needed to get to because it was just not there yet. I think it's something we've really got to address in the state because it really is in 3 different areas with our local police, with our hospitals, with people that are actually involved. It really implicates all of them, and I think we've got to find some solution there. So I think that's a topic we really need to look at. I'm kind of interested in Senator French's idea. I think that there's some merit to looking into that, but I don't know how far we can go. But
Senator Kolb, maybe you're fast forwarding a little bit on us. So, right now we're just taking any additional topics. Title 25 was on that initial list. I think you're safe there.
Okay.
We'll move around the room next and get your kind of your ranked choice. But do you have any additional topics for us?
I had one, but we'll leave it be until we get Title 25. It's net metering and see if we can work on that.
Oh. Hey, Chairman's will answer.
He doesn't like us.
All right. Net metering for the Judiciary Committee. Why not? We like controversial topics. Okay. That's the committee. I'll go one last time just to the public. Any other public comment in the virtual world? Did anyone else show up for us? No? Okay. No one in the room? All right. Well, thank you. With that, we'll close public comment. We'll move to the committee, and then Chairman Nethercott, I think maybe we'll just go down the just go down the row and you can tell us, certainly, I think it might also be easier for us when we're all done, if everyone would send us an email with your kind of ranking choice. And you don't have to rank all these topics. That would be an exercise in futility, but maybe if you could just give us your top 3, and it doesn't have to be on a list that we've discussed today. You think of something else that you really think is important and you wish you would have brought it up today, send it to us in your list. And that just, I think, would be helpful.
Yeah, so historically, we've asked for top 6. So committee members, email your co-chairs your top 6 from the list that's in front of you and the list that's been discussed today. We want that by close of business today. That's 5 o'clock.
All right, I stand corrected. Top 6 by 5 o'clock. All right, but now's a good time to certainly elucidate on topics and let the public kind of know what you're thinking too. We'll start with Representative Craigo.
It's going to sound like Representative Presents is talking. So my top 3 for purposes of today would be e-filing / e-records, Title 25, and Representative Stith's topic regarding non-competes. Thank you.
Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My main topics are going to be the officer disclosure of peace officer recordings, the access to conduct records and access to records in general, and then the Title 20, or I guess juvenile justice. I have to pick 3.
Sorry, go ahead, Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Co-Chair. So I'll just give 2. I do like the draft list overall. I'd say my number 1 is definitely the bias motivated crime. I'm interested in us aligning with the federal uniform crime reporting across all of our agencies. So I think that would be good. And then juvenile justice would be my number 2.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to pick the one I'm been trying for quite a while, the governmental immunity inside contracts. I think it's pretty important. Probably an Article 5 would be interesting for me. I don't know if we've mentioned that, but I think that'd be great to talk about. And non-compete clause would be great.
Thank you. Representative Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One area that I've been really thinking about as we struggle with budgets is the workload that we put on our agencies that kind of fall under the umbrella of the Judiciary Committee. And I would like to say is take a look at, are there things that we require in statute that drive up the workload of some of our agencies that maybe if we adjusted, I'll give you a simple example, renewal of concealed weapons permits. You know, we have to do that every 5 years. If we were to increase that to every 10 years, you know, we reduce some of that workloads. And so we went through this process years ago when I worked at the city of Casper, where we couldn't give more people, we couldn't give more budgets, but we could try to balance that workload. So I think that's going to be one I'm going to put on my list. Other topics, I like the constitutional issues, Article 5, Second Amendment protections, and religious freedom. I would think we could have a really robust discussion on those topics. And I think Representative Larson's topic of contract immunity is important, and I think it would be worthy of and I don't think it's going to be a really time consuming topic, unlike Title 25, which I think we absolutely have to deal with. And Representative Stith's non-compete clause, I think, would be a worthy topic to look at. And I would be open to DUI amendments, but I think others probably think we've already gone down that road, but I think there's more to discuss there.
Representative Stith, we could always invite Representative Washit to the Appropriations Committee to talk about workloads of agencies and budgets. Go ahead, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My top choice would be juvenile justice. A second girls sports, women's sports, K through 12 and college. And third, Title 25. I definitely agree that it needs overhauled and it presents some interesting issues in my area, in particular with Yellowstone National Park and some of the relationships with surrounding agencies and the hospitals as well. And then I'll add in e-filing and non-compete clauses as well.
Senator French. I guess you're number one.
I think my number one would be Fairness in Women's Sports Act. So you're correct. That one, I think that's very important, controversial, but sometimes we need to address a statewide controversial issue. There's a lot of parents out there, grandparents, you know, that are really concerned about this. So that's my number one. Number two would be Title 25. I think that needs to be addressed. I know when I was county commissioner, Title 25 was a big deal, very costly, a lot of issues with that. Then my third would be probably Representative Larson's contract immunity would probably be my third. Then I'll pick three more by closing time at 5 o'clock. Thank you.
Representative Wanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my top three are the juvenile justice issues. I don't think this committee, who has worked in juvenile justice for 8 years, has quite got it right. Title 25, we've had select committees, Labor Health did 2 years of interim. I mean, the ultimate answer is everybody wants more money, but I don't know what statutorily we're going to do. But so juvenile justice, I think bias motivated crimes, and we could combine it with all of those issues, which I think it's good for this committee to really understand where the world is and where the country is. And if we put bias motivated crimes and transgender issues, I think that'd be a good topic. And I do think someone should mention marijuana, just because that is an issue this legislature has not really dealt with. We have not had an interim study on it. I don't know it's going to go that far, but the world is also changing out there, and we have to get our laws kind of in line with where we want to be instead of sticking our head in the sand. So I'm not promoting that we push marijuana, but I do think it's really important we look at it and get our laws aligned with where other states are going, so we don't have severe difficulties and people continue to move through Wyoming or go to other states and purchase this product, and our criminal laws are much different than our varied states. So those have been my three.
Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. So I think that my three would be also Title 25, although it was interesting what Representative Swanisser just said. Maybe not always looking, starting and reinventing the wheel, but I think there's some things to be looked at there. I too am interested in the bias motivated crime. Might be surprising to some, but I think we're starting a good discussion there, and I'd like to keep going down that road and see if we can, I don't know, just find something that everybody's comfortable with. And this might seem basic, but Supreme Court opinions, I think that's a way that needed fixes are already identified. So I think that's a good one to tackle. So those are my three.
Senator Senator Cost, the K's.
ST, not BLB, okay? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Title 25, I'm going to have at the top just because we really do need to do something with that. And I think it may involve looking outside of the box, looking at different ways to approach it or something. I don't know, because right now money isn't going to be the best answer. Something else has got to do it. And so we got to see what's out there we can do. E-filing, I mean, heavens, it's fun to take on something that we've been struggling with for a while anyway. And then Supreme Court, I agree the Supreme Court decisions and what they've got is important, and it would be good to hear that. So those would be my three.
Now Senator Kolb.
Why, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Ks are confusing down here. But my number one choice would be the Supreme Court opinions. And I'll say that because what the heck am I in here for? I mean, we've got direct information from the Supreme Court that had an issue with something, and what we would choose not to look at those. I mean, as a new person, it just seems kind of obvious to me. So that's my number one. And then number two and three would be, they'd be good little bills, and they'd be quick. And it would be the Board of County Commissioners' ability to dissolve a fair board, give them clear statutory ability. I think it's pretty quick, pretty clean. Wouldn't take a lot of time for these other issues that I think we'd have to talk about. And the other one, and the third one, excuse me, would be the review of county attorneys and sheriff's salaries. And I think this committee's already gone through that once and had a lot of discussion. So I think we're kind of close to an answer there. And that would be 1, 2, and 3. And I will certainly comply with my 5 o'clock deadline. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm nervous about the 5 o'clock deadline. I haven't experienced it yet, but
I'm preparing my gold stars. I
But I-
just want that noted. I already have ideas for where they'll go.
and then Senator Cooper, not a K, but similarly sounding. I don't know how Senator Nethercott does that, but with the cost Kolb Cooper.
We love alliteration on the Senate Judiciary Committee.
I guess we kind of all fall in a bunch there. I'm gonna have to go with Title 25 with so much of the group here. I think it's in the 5 counties that I represent. It's an ongoing issue in all 5 counties, and it's something that absolutely needs to be addressed. It's a serious problem. I think we're remiss if we don't go to look at what our Supreme Court judges did and try to learn from. It couldn't have been our mistakes. It must have been their misreading of what we intended. But the information's there, and if mistakes have been made, we need to rectify them as soon as possible. E-filing is going to be right there on the very top of the list. It's something that's I think critical for the whole state to get things done in a timely fashion and in an orderly fashion. And I'm going to put a fourth in there with the e-filing. That would be Senator French's transports. I think that's something that I'm hearing from all across my district also. Thank you very much.
Committee, I'm just gonna take some privilege here concerning Title 25. I'm so glad to hear that everyone identifies that being an ongoing concern. It is. It was worked in the interim. And it was also been worked by the Health and Labor Committee, and that was unintentional, but then became intentional to be worked by both committees kind of simultaneously to understand different solutions that could be addressed, both on the compensation piece associated with medical providers, county jails, court system, where all that different money goes. And so a House bill did come forward out of Health and Labor really addressing that this year. And I don't recall the number, it just passed the Senate. And that is one way that the counties identified to save resources associated with Title 25s and other folks who might need uncompensated care or involuntary care. I don't know if it might not have been communicated to you in such a way that it came out of a lot of those works. And that's that tier system of priority compensation, folks. And one of those was the involuntary hospitalizations in that tier 1. So that's important to recognize. So as we move forward with Title 25, as the co-chairs have identified, we will, how narrow in scope this committee's work will be on Title 25. It should be narrow enough that we are not having to take just one bite at the elephant, that we will actually be, disposing of the elephant in total. And so really what I've asked the committee to do historically and what the work has been done, there's already a Senate file that was published that I did not bring forward because it wasn't ready for prime time, but there's a Senate file already drafted and prepared that will be the starting place. And we will work with our county attorneys who really are tasked on the front end of walking through the court system for an involuntary hospitalization and identifying where in the statute there could be further clarity to reduce costs, to provide efficiencies, to provide further due process protections, and reaching those balances associated with really the touch point between the county attorney's offices and an involuntary hospitalization and law enforcement and the court system. So that's what this will be narrowly focused into, so we can actually get it done. I'm hopeful that's helpful.
Yeah, and Co-Chairman Nethercott, I served on the subcommittee that created that bill that the Senate is reviewing as a member of appropriations, and that was my only thought with Title 25. And I think you just hit the nail on the head. Is I don't want to step into some of the work that's been done by the appropriations and the health committee, but I think getting that it was the right time to hold that bill back, let the other bill go through. Now we kind of know what our scope is versus that scope. And I think that is going to be helpful, that we have a bill as a starting place as well, that we just apparently have to get ready for prime time. Like prime time. All right. Committee, I think that's it. So from here, you know, especially since we have so many new members, both in the House and the Senate, the process obviously goes to Management Council. Between that time that these topics are presented to Management Council, what the plan is that Chairman Nethercott and I get together. We go through the list, we go through your tallies. Obviously, if you send that email before 5 o'clock, apparently, that's really helpful in our discussions as we take the list forward. Things can be added still at this point, and things can be removed as we refine the list and get it ready for Management Council. So just know that's really the process from here. All right. Nothing further or any? Yeah, Senator Cooper, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you kind of briefly explain to some of us less experienced in this process, how we go about adding a topic when it comes up that our constituents or somebody may bring to us?
As an interim topic, if it's judiciary, you have to get that topic to me and Chairman Nethercott prior to.
I think it's too late.
Well, I don't know I guess there's an ambiguity on whether you have to have public comment on the topic or not.
You
But
don't. We don't need public comment on the topic. We can make a topic really anytime.
yeah, so I
The
don't.
co-chairman and I. However, you're not going to have buy-in from your committee members, the joint judiciary members, if it's not discussed really now. So I would be very cautious about putting up a new, the task for today is identifying your top 6 that have been discussed today by close of business tonight. We meet with Management Council on April 17th, which really is a short time away, just a couple of weeks. In the meantime, we have to get with LSO, identify those topics, calculate each committee's priorities, and then have LSO draft a letter to Management Council and get all of that ready and prepared timely. So there's not a lot of opportunity here to identify new or additional topics that haven't been discussed today. So you can try to reach to your joint judiciary members just on your own, but that's probably foreclosed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, just to clarify though, I'm not cutting anything off until we submit. Ultimately, the chairman submit the list, but I think Senator Nethercott has much more experience than I do with the whole process in getting all of that carved out for time and stuff. So I think she's probably right that it'd be harder on us and harder on LSO to work a topic in at this point. I think it's really true.
And Mr. Co-Chairman and members of the public and the committee, this process never works well, but it's particularly more difficult now as a result of our delayed timing in the session from the pandemic and when we started this year. So making the time frame a little tighter than it even normally would be, so that adds to some of the challenges that we face.
And maybe one last thing to say though, and I kind of brought this up with one of your proposals, Senator French, which was if you had the chance to submit that for education. And I think that's one thing I would be looking at, Senator Cooper, is if there's a topic that you think you can really squeeze into another committee, even though it's not your committee and they haven't met yet, it's probably a good idea to try to get that on the list. And I would also say some of these topics flow both ways in committees and could be taken up by any committee. We've already pretty much said what we want to do with Title 25, but just to give that as an example, if you weren't sure that Title 25 was going to make the final list, might not have been a bad idea to get that over to health simultaneously. I don't know if education is met, Senator French, but I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not saying your idea is not on or off the list. I'm just saying it might be a good idea if they haven't met to see if you can get it on their joint discussion at least as well. And then there is an opportunity once LSO has everything. I believe there's a pretty clear opportunity to say, okay, we've doubled something up and remove it. But I've seen that happen in the past.
Mr. Co-Chairman, too, just for a point of clarification to the new committee members as well, just recognizing the next step. So April 17th will be the Management Council meeting. And then in May, there'll be the first committee meetings of the interim. So approximately 3 to 4 weeks from that point in time will be the first interim committee meeting. So if that committee meeting is going to be productive based on the interim topics, LSO needs at least a few weeks to prepare for those first meetings, whatever those topics may look like. And that's for all 10 committees and the select committees. So there's a large amount of work going on, high volume, many moving parts, but that's just how fast this pace is happening. And so just urge caution about that. So we'll have our first joint judiciary meeting of the interim sometime in May.
All right. And just of note, 1/3 of my committee has already submitted their email and received their gold stars. Senators, better step it up. All right. With that,
They're all in.
we'll conclude this joint judiciary